Have you ever felt like no matter what happens in your life, the incredible highs, the really tough lows, you eventually just drift back?
Yeah. Like back to the same general level of contentment.
Exactly. Like you get that dream job, you're absolutely thrilled for a bit.
And then it just becomes normal.
Right. Or you go through a hard breakup, you feel awful. But eventually, well, you feel like yourself again.
It definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is happiness somehow fixed, like, I don't know, your height or something?
Or is it something you can actually work on, influence, maybe even increase at its very baseline?
That feeling you're describing, that tendency to return to a personal baseline, that's precisely what researchers have looked into.
Yeah, things like the happiness set point, or what's it called? The hedonic treadmill.
Exactly, the hedonic treadmill.
And today, we're doing a deep dive right into that whole idea. We've gathered quite a stack of sources here.
We have research on the science of well-being, studies looking at how our environment shapes things,
and also explorations into specific practices, things like gratitude or flow, that seem to genuinely impact our mood.
So our mission today is to unpack what these sources tell us. Is this set point idea like a hard wall?
Or can we, through deliberate actions, maybe fostering the right conditions around us, actually nudge that baseline level of joy, maybe even raise it?
Let's dig in and see what we found.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So this concept, the hedonic treadmill, it really gained traction back in the 1970s.
Right. You mentioned Brickman and Campbell were key researchers there.
That's right. And the name itself, hedonic treadmill, it paints such a clear picture, doesn't it?
It really does. Like you're running and running, maybe achieving things, maybe going through stuff.
Putting in all this effort.
But your actual underlying happiness level, it just stays put.
Yeah, the core idea was that we adapt. We adapt to major life changes, good or bad, and our emotional state kind of snaps back to a stable, maybe predetermined baseline.
And there was that classic study often brought up to support this, right, from 78, comparing lottery winners and...
Yeah. Lottery winners and people who had become severely disabled through accidents.
And the finding was pretty striking, wasn't it?
It was. The lottery winners, they got that initial huge rush of happiness, obviously, and the accident victims, profound despair.
But then, after some time passed,
their reported happiness levels started looking surprisingly similar to where they were before these huge events.
Wow. So it really looked like strong evidence for this magnetic pullback to your individual baseline.
Exactly. It felt almost like destiny. You have your setting and that's kind of it.
But, and this is a big but, I gather, more recent research has added a lot more nuance.
Oh, absolutely. Crucial layers of complexity. Later studies, people like Daner, Lucas, Skolin, they started questioning if everyone returns to the same neutral point.
Or if that set point is even completely fixed.
Right. First off, it's not like everyone starts at the same baseline level.
Okay, so we all have different starting points for happiness.
Precisely. Research confirms that. Some people just naturally operate at a higher level of general being. And genetics, that plays a pretty big role in that initial setting.
How big a role are we talking?
Twin studies suggest maybe around 50% of the variation in our happiness levels could be down to genetics, heritable.
50%? Wow, okay, that's substantial.
It is substantial. But here's the critical nuance. The other 50% isn't genetic fate.
Ah.
And even that genetic baseline, it isn't necessarily like an anchor you can't ever move.
Right.
These later studies found people vary quite a bit in how much they adapt to things and also how quickly they bounce back towards that baseline.
So some people bounce back faster, maybe more completely.
Exactly. And for others, some significant events can actually cause a more lasting shift. It's not uniform.
Okay, so it's not just that you adapt, but how you adapt and the baseline itself. Maybe it's not totally fixed for everyone.
That seems to be the case. And different aspects of well-being might act differently too, like our immediate feelings, our mood. That might bounce back pretty quickly.
Okay, the day-to-day ups and downs.
Right. But our overall life satisfaction, that more thought-out assessment of your life as a whole, that might have let's call it a softer baseline.
Softer baseline, meaning?
Meaning that some studies suggest for maybe, say, a quarter of people, major life events can lead to a more lasting change in that overall satisfaction level. It's not completely resistant to change.
So the set point isn't totally impenetrable then. Certain things can shift it long term.
Definitely not impenetrable. We have longitudinal studies tracking people over many years.
And they show
that certain major life events are linked with lasting changes in well-being. Things like divorce or the death of a spouse
Makes sense. Those are huge.
or prolonged unemployment, particularly for men in one study,
Right.
and severe long-term disability. Unlike maybe the snapshot in that first 70s study, this can demonstrably lower someone's well-being set point over the long haul.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some shocks are just so profound, so ongoing, they fundamentally change the conditions of your life.
Right. And it's complicated too. Another study, this one in the UK, looked at lottery winners again.
Oh. What did they find?
They found that winning even a moderate amount did seem to correlate with higher mental well-being, lasting at least a couple of years.
Ah, so maybe that original 78 study wasn't the final word?
Probably not the complete story. So the takeaway seems to be adaptation is powerful, genetics matter, yes, but life circumstances, they aren't irrelevant to your long-term well-being either.
So it sounds less like one fixed number and more like maybe a range or a sort of gravitational pull that can be influenced.
That feels like a better analogy. Influenced by external forces, and as we'll get to, maybe internal efforts too.
And you mentioned other factors influence our ability to adapt, besides big events.
Yes, those genetic predispositions we talked about. Also personality traits, like how prone you are to negative emotions, neuroticism, or how outgoing you are, extroversion.
Okay.
And really intriguingly, potentially even physical changes in the brain itself.
Physical changes. You mean the brain structure can adapt based on experience?
Exactly. There's that famous example of London taxi drivers.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this.
Their hippocampus, the part of the brain heavily involved in spatial navigation, it actually gets physically larger as they learn the incredibly complex map of London.
Wow.
Now, that's about navigation, not directly happiness. But the hippocampus is also linked to mood regulation.
Ah, okay.
So it shows our brain structure isn't fixed. It's adaptable based on experience and learning. And that opens the door to thinking our emotional systems, our well-being systems, might also be trainable, maybe even capable of physical changes over time.
That really shifts the whole idea of a set point, doesn't it? From something fixed, maybe just genetic, to something potentially more dynamic, something we could actually influence by what we do.
Precisely. And that moves us from thinking about happiness as just a state you return to towards seeing it as an active, dynamic process.
It's process.
Yeah. Our sources really emphasize that happiness is primarily a feeling, an immediate emotional experience. It's deeply biological, tied into the brain's reward systems.
And the really exciting part,
The research suggests it is trainable.
trainable happiness. I like the sound of that. So it's not just the thought you have, it's a biological system you can actually work with.
That's the implication, yes. And there's a model that helps understand this neurobiologically, sometimes called the ABC model of motivation and positive states.
ABC model. Okay, what does that stand for?
It suggests there are different kinds or flavors of positive feelings or drives, and they might be more prominent at different life stages.
Okay, let's break down A, B, and C then.
Okay, so type A is wanting or approach. Think anticipation, craving, excitement.
The thrill of the chase.
Exactly. Pursuing goals, exploring new things. It's strongly linked to dopamine in the brain's reward pathways. Drives us towards novelty, achievement.
And you said this is more common when?
Often feels most prominent in youth. That intense motivation, exploring the world, building things, chasing dreams.
Makes total sense. That youthful energy and ambition. Okay, what's B?
Type B is avoiding or departing. This is more about relief. Relief from stress, threat, or discomfort.
Ah, okay. Not chasing something good, but escaping something bad.
Sort of. It's tied into our stress response, our coping mechanisms. The positive feeling isn't the thrill, it's the profound relief when a big stressor is gone, or you successfully navigate something tough.
Like finally finishing a huge project or getting through a really difficult patch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the sources suggest this type of positive, the relief feeling, might be more prevalent in midlife.
Midlife. Why then?
Well, midlife is often a period of high stress, right? Big responsibilities, career, family, finances. You're often protecting what you've built, managing crises. So relief is a genuine positive feeling in that context.
Yeah, okay. It's not exactly joy, but feeling that pressure lift is definitely good. Okay, A is wanting, B is avoiding relief. What's C?
Type C is non-wanting or assertion. This is about deep contentment, inner peace, acceptance, a sense of just being or staying in a peaceful state.
Less striving, less avoiding, more just calm.
Exactly. Feeling integrated, calm, connected. This state is linked to different brain systems. The parasympathetic nervous system, maybe neurochemicals like oxytocin, serotonin.
And you mentioned it involves inhibiting that dopamine wanting drive.
Crucially, yes. It's less about the chase. The sources connect this to what's sometimes called the affiliation system, social bonding, altruism, and this deep, quiet satisfaction. It seems to become more characteristic in older age.
So the brain's pathways for feeling good actually shift across our lifespan.
That's what this model suggests, yes. And it offers a potential way to understand that well-known U-curve of happiness.
Ah, the U curve. Right, I've seen that. Happiness is often higher when you're young.
Dips in midlife.
And then rises again when you're older, across many cultures, right?
Exactly. So the dip in midlife may be linked to that stress management, type B relief state being dominant.
And the rise later in life.
Potentially linked to the development of this more contentment-focused type C state. Successfully navigating midlife stress might even help build the capacity for that deeper satisfaction later on.
That's interesting. It connects to that satisfaction paradox too, doesn't it? Older people reporting high life satisfaction even with health issues.
It does seem like a paradox if you only think happiness comes from perfect health or constant excitement.
But this ABC model suggests it's more about the internal systems maturing.
Right. As we age, perhaps the capacity for contentment independent of perfect external conditions grows. The sources talk about a shift from focusing on me and achieving towards we, connection, generativity, maybe letting go of constant striving.
So that deeper type C contentment might just be more resilient to physical challenges.
That's a possible interpretation.
Yeah.
It's less fragile than maybe the type A pleasure or type B relief.
Okay, so happiness isn't just a static point you snap back to. It's more like a journey, an evolving state, drawing on different biological systems over time.
Well put.
Which brings us right back to the big question. Can you actually influence this journey? Can you nudge that baseline or that range upwards?
And based on the sources we've looked at, the answer seems to be a pretty strong yes. To a significant extent, anyway.
Really? Despite the genetics?
Despite the genetics, remember, that's maybe 50%. A large chunk, some research suggests potentially up to 60% of our well-being seems influenced by our behavior, our environment, and what we learn.
60%. So happiness and life satisfaction are, in a way, trainable skills.
That's what the evidence points towards. And our environment. Hugely important.
Environment plays a big role. How so?
Absolutely crucial. Findings from things like the World Happiness Report consistently show this. Factors outside ourselves are powerful.
Like what kinds of factors?
Things like having someone you can count on, a sense of personal freedom, generosity in society, and a really big one, trust.
Trust. How does societal trust impact individual happiness?
The sources give some really compelling examples. They compare people living in low trust versus high trust societies. In places with low social trust, people don't trust each other. Institutions, the government, the well-being gap between someone doing well and someone struggling is massive.
A huge difference.
But in a high-trust environment, that well-being gap shrinks considerably.
Wow. So trust acts like a buffer. It helps those who are struggling more.
Exactly. A strong, positive social fabric, especially one with high trust, acts like a shock absorber. It lessens the blow of hardship and misfortune on well-being. It actually does the most good for those who are in distress.
So it leads to a more equitable distribution of happiness, in a way.
Precisely. The sources even show that things like high income or strong personal social support become somewhat less critical in a high-trust society because the environment itself provides a certain baseline of security and support.
That's powerful. Really makes you think about the importance of community, that social fabric.
And community belonging is another factor mentioned, yeah. Especially in some richer countries, feeling like you belong to your local community correlates strongly with higher happiness.
So fostering connections, building trust, nurturing community, these are fundamental ways to support well-being for everyone.
Absolutely. And it doesn't always need to be huge things. The sources mention data from the UK, showing that just doing simple activities with a friend or partner significantly boosts your mood. Things like walking together, commuting together, even just waiting in line together.
Huh. Things that might be boring or slightly annoying alone become positive when shared.
Exactly. It just highlights that simple, profound impact of weaving social connection into our daily lives.
Okay, so environment, relationships, trust, those are foundational. What about things we can actively do ourselves, intentional practices?
Yes, definitely. The sources point to several key practices that seem well supported by research. Let's start with gratitude.
Gratitude. Okay, like keeping a journal.
That's one way. Things like keeping a gratitude diary, writing thank you notes, or even just taking a moment to mentally count your blessings. Recent meta-analyses have looked across many studies on this.
And what's the verdict? Does just thinking grateful thoughts actually make a difference?
The findings seem pretty robust. These practices don't just give you a fleeting, warm, fuzzy feeling.
No.
They've been shown to lead to measurable, sustained increases in feelings of gratitude itself, yes, but also in overall life satisfaction and general mental health.
Sustained increases. That's key.
And, crucially, they also showed significant reductions in negative states, things like anxiety, depression.
Reductions. How significant?
We're talking meaningful decreases. On standard scales for anxiety and depression, reductions often around the 7 or 8% mark were observed in some analyses. Less worry, less psychological pain.
Wow. So it's not just a nice idea. It's a tool that can genuinely build resilience and improve your emotional well-being.
That's what the evidence suggests. And it seems pretty accessible, effective across different kinds of people.
Okay. Gratitude is one. What else? You mentioned mindfulness.
Mindfulness, meditation, contemplative practices. These link back really nicely to that type C state we talked about in the ABC model.
Right. The contentment, the non-wanting state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The sources suggest these practices actually influence the brain networks involved in reward, motivation, but also things like empathy and altruism.
So they might physically reshape brain pathways over time.
That's the idea. They're associated with better stress management. They seem to contribute to healthy aging, and they're seen as potentially helping shift your long-term happiness trajectory towards that deeper contentment and inner peace. Regular practice seems key.
Okay. Gratitude, mindfulness, and the last one you mentioned was flow.
Flow, yes. Described by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi as the optimal experience.
Optimal experience. What does that feel like?
It's that state where you are completely absorbed in what you're doing, so intensely focused that you lose track of time.
Yeah.
You lose self-consciousness. That inner critic goes quiet, and you feel this sense of almost effortless control and engagement.
And that happens when the challenge matches your skill level.
Yeah, exactly. It needs to be challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so hard that it's overwhelming or anxiety-provoking.
Like being lost in playing music or coding or maybe a sport.
Precisely. Rock climbing, painting, deep conversation, writing, lots of things can induce flow.
And why does it feel so good? What's happening in the brain?
Well, research shows activity in brain reward areas during flow. But what's really interesting is a decrease in activity in regions linked to self-referential thought.
Self-referential thought. Like thinking about yourself. Worrying.
Exactly. The part of your brain that does the ruminating, the worrying about yourself, seems to quiet down. Yeah. Flow pulls you out of your head and totally into the present moment in the activity itself.
So it's like a natural antidote to anxiety and self-criticism.
It seems to function that way, yes. The sources highlight it as a trainable state that not only feels great, but boosts overall well-being, helps counter rumination, and might even protect against burnout.
Okay, so if we pull all these threads together now, the set point isn't fixed, happiness evolves biologically, environment matters hugely, and these practices, gratitude, mindfulness, flow, they actually work. What's the core message here?
I think the big takeaway is that while, yes, there's this idea of a set point and genetics give us a starting range, it is definitely not a rigid, unchangeable destiny.
Okay.
Our capacity for happiness, for life satisfaction, it's dynamic. It naturally changes and matures over our lives, maybe following patterns like that U-curve.
And it's influenced by this whole mix. Yeah. Genetics, life events, our environment, our social world.
And critically, by our own intentional actions and practices.
And the power to influence it. A lot of that seems to lie in those practices and in our connection.
Absolutely. Nurturing social connections, building trust, actively practicing gratitude, engaging in mindfulness, seeking out flow.
The sources suggest these aren't just fleeting mood boosts.
Exactly. They're seen as practices that can potentially influence the underlying neurobiology of well-being over time. They help build resilience. They might even potentially shift that soft baseline for life satisfaction upwards, or at least expand your range of joy and contentment, especially the deeper, more lasting kinds.
So this deep dive really highlights that your happiness isn't just something that happens to you. You have agency.
You really do. By focusing on strengthening your social world, your community, and consistently engaging in practices like gratitude, mindfulness, finding flow, you can actively participate in shaping your own journey towards greater well-being.
Kind of like how our brains and life experiences naturally shape it over time anyway.
Precisely. And maybe the goal isn't even about being,
So maybe instead of asking yourself today, am I happy? Which can be a tricky question.
A more powerful question, maybe a more actionable one, reflecting this idea of trainability and agency we've discussed. might be.
What practice can I engage in today, even just a small one, to cultivate a sense of joy or contentment?
Or even, how can I weave just a little more connection or gratitude or mindfulness or flow into the next hour, the rest of my day, to potentially nudge my own well-being over time?